Welcome to the special board meeting for the Newman Crescent Unified School District. Today is December 11th. Roll call, Mr. Walk. Here. Mrs. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Cerruti.
Here.
And Mr. Cabral is here. Item B, please stand for the flag salute. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number C, approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda as listed for tonight?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Rivas.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Cerruti. Thank you. Mr. Walk.
Aye.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Ms. Cerruti.
Aye.
Ms. Cabral says aye. Item D, public communication. Any person wishing to comment on the agenda items may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name. It would be appreciated if you would limit your comments to 3 minutes. California law prohibits the school board from taking action on any matter which is not on the posted agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the board. Per board policy BB 9323, individual speakers may be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda or non-agenda item. The board may limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. With board consent, the president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public presentation, depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. The president may take a poll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask that additional persons speak only if they have something new to add. At this time, does any members of the public have any items on the agenda items to address the board? All right, seeing none. Item E, action items. Review and approve the first interim budget report for the fiscal year 2025-2026 year. And that's going to be presented by Ms. Tapia.
Hopefully that doesn't create an echo. And sorry if I get a cough. Hanging in there, guys. Good evening, Superintendent Pruitt, Board President Cabral, and esteemed board members. I have one item to present tonight, and that is the 25-26 first interim report. Oh, I just remember I have to click. Upward. So before we move into a high-level summary of the first interim, I want to center us around what exactly is the first interim. Ultimately, it's the first opportunity that we have to bring back the adopted budget that we presented to you all for approval in the June meeting. It normally is done with the lens of viewing any form of current trends that we've noticed in the first couple of months of the fiscal year, specifically through October 31st. It is also an opportunity for us to make adjustments accordingly and also look at the multi-year projection. Now, I do want to ensure that we center ourselves around the fact that it is a projection. It is only as good as this very moment and what we know currently, and projections change all the time. In the business world, we talk about projections are only as good as for a minute, and then something comes across your desk and your projections need to be adopted and change and drastically change in a different direction. So do take it with that in mind and knowing that it is a first iteration, especially when we get to the multi-year projection piece of the presentation. Oh, yes, good. And like any other budget for a school district, our starting point is always going to be enrollment. As you know, we are funded in average daily attendance, and that is based on the students that are enrolled in our district. So our starting point is to provide an analysis of what our enrollment trend has been in the last couple of years. Specifically, Pruitt and I looked at what the current trends for the first 3 months of attendance was looking like as of October 31st. Actually, was the end of our, believe, our third month of attendance reporting. So we had a really good snapshot and opportunity for us to assess some of that enrollment that we originally used to build our adopted budget during the June adoption. So we did feel it was a good opportunity for us to adjust the course of the projections for our enrollment. We did bring forward 3,030 during adopted budget. Given the trend that we were currently looking at, we decided that it was a good opportunity for us to adjust it to alienate a little bit more to what we were noticing, and that is downward to 2,981. We also took the opportunity to adjust the 2 following years, 26-27 and 27-28. Okay, good. Hopefully I didn't break it. In addition to that, so the other half of this equation of enrollment is average daily attendance. As you know, we are funded by ADA, that is calculated based on a percentage. When we brought forward your adopted budget, we also did it at a 94%, almost 95. But I don't know if you know, our school sites are actually doing a phenomenal job of getting students to show up on a daily basis, and we've been doing a little bit of recovery of attendance. So we felt it was adequate for us to adjust that percentage slightly upward to 95.03. I will say that for 26-27 and 27-28, the multi-year projection that was adopted in June did include a little bit of a higher percentage in the 97 to 98% range. We felt we probably should take a conservative approach at this time, so we did downward adjust the out years to pretty much reflect what we're noticing in the current year. So please keep that in mind. The other part of this equation is also understanding how our LCFF funded formula really works. We have the opportunity to get funded in 3 possibilities: the current year ADA, the prior year ADA, or an average of the 3. In the last couple of years, we've actually, and it would always be the highest of those 3 calculations. In the last couple of years, we've been funded in the average of the 3 years. The reason I want to mention that is, even though our enrollment is shifting downward and our ADA is shifting upward, we don't get to feel that right away as far as funding goes, because we will be funded in the higher of those 3 options. However, I do think we have to keep in mind that if it continues in a trajectory of downward, eventually we're not going to have the higher years to kind of balance out the lower years. So we do need to keep that in mind as we move forward and start thinking about the bigger picture and the out years beyond the current year. So I just wanted to highlight that. Other assumptions, STIRS and PERS. STIRS at 19.10 is kept the same across the 3 years. I will say with PERS, one thing to keep in mind, they actually don't have a cap in what percentage of employer rate it can reach, which is quite frankly scary, but we are using school services data board as of this moment during an active budget. Those are what the data points that we use to update our projections. And that includes COLA and CPI. For COLA, I do want to highlight the fact that even though we are currently projecting that we're going to receive a cost of living adjustment that usually translates to LCFF funding receiving that percentage, the flip side of that equation is consumer price index, meaning accounting for how much more it's going to cost us to operate, normally in the non-labor side of things. So even though we are getting a COLA, it kind of cancels out a little bit with the CPI increase that we're projecting. So we do have to keep in mind that COLA is not an automatic increase in percentage to our revenue. And just now to move into some of the areas that we did adjust between adopted budget and first interim, beginning with LCFF. Given that what I just mentioned about funded ADA, this adjustment of 458 is really driven by our unduplicated pupil count. Unfortunately, we did adjust that downward due to our most recent CalPET certification. I think originally we had it at 71% and we adjusted that to like 66%. And that's just based on the collection of not free and reduced lunch applications anymore, but alternative income applications, as well as those who are directly certified, if they're foster youth, all those categories that count once for each of those students. So we did have to do a downward adjustment, and that does impact what we get in supplemental and concentration. So we wanted to ensure that we're capturing that now. Federal revenues, we had a slight increase in that area, and that is sort of related to unaudited actuals. I believe I mentioned that we were carrying over funds that we originally intended to spend in a specific manner but didn't materialize. So those carried over funds are now being represented in this budget, and that's 24,917, mostly for title funding. I will say the biggest area of adjustment is in our state revenue, and that is for a new discretionary block grant that is related to PD and student support. When I say it's discretionary, it is very much discretionary. It's about $890,000 for Newman, and that is assumed as revenue in this given year. We have received a portion of that, and it's already flowing through our actual books as of this moment, and cash. We actually have received the cash for that, partially. In addition to that, we did have some additional state revenue grants that we are in partnership with Stanislaus County as far as behavioral health initiative grants that we're working with them. That's a continuation of various other one-time grants that are sunsetting. That is also assumed in this adjustment, and some additional, a little bit of Prop 28. That's what drove that increase in state revenue. In the local revenue, one area that you may recognize is the TOSCA grant. We just needed to reflect that accordingly. Our teachers work very hard to write out those grants, and some of them landed some really good portions, and they've been working and carrying out their proposals. I believe they just recently did a field trip based on that grant. So all in all, we added about 1.5 to our revenue side between adopted budget and first interim. And I just wanted to show you an image as far as the reflection of what really makes up our general fund. The breakdown being evidently 75% coming predominantly from that LCFF formula that we were talking about earlier. The other ones really they're going to continue to shrink, right? Let's be realistic. With the sunsetting of a lot of the one-time funds, you'll probably see the state revenue kind of level out. I won't say it will equate to your federal, but it won't be as big of a bucket, or in this case, it's a pie. For general fund expenditures, just to highlight some of the areas that created adjustments, and certificated salaries, this is just a natural placing of our certificated employees, just adjusting them to where they landed in the salary schedule, as well a few FTEs that were not originally budgeted for in the adopted budget, as well as any labor costs that were not originally budgeted for. I just want to remind you all that the adopted budget did include the 1% increase that we negotiated after 24-25 ended, but it didn't include the other items such as like longevity stipend, the extended teacher pay increase. So those things just needed to be accounted for in this year, and we are ensuring that we're capturing that here. Sorry. And the classified salaries, very similarly, step and column adjustments to ensure that those projections are reflecting where people are truly placed in our salary schedules, as well as a few FD increases that are related to our restricted funding sources. And naturally, if you increase certificated and classified, you're increasing your employee benefits. So that increase is kind of going along with the top two. And books and supplies, actually, I would say the three other categories, they are all related to additional expenses to our one-time funds. Some of these one-time funds are sunsetting. We have to ensure we're spending them down to the best of our abilities and to zero them out. And that is exactly what we're doing here. And that included some of the UPK implementation grant, some of the TOSCA, as I mentioned, as well as some A through G. These are the lingering COVID funds, so A through G, learning loss mitigation, and access and success grant. So we are ensuring that we are embedding those expenses and zeroing out those funds. Lastly, in capital outlay, we are simply recognizing the fact that we did have some one-time unused funds from last year that we can actually now use for a cost of food service equipment that we did account for at that perfect turning point of June to July. So this is actually good news because otherwise this would have been funded through our Fund 13. So this was exciting news when they extended the deadline on that one. So all in all, we added about 2.1 as far as expenses go in comparison to our adopted budget. And just to give you that breakdown again, as what our general fund expense breakdown looks like, the majority of close to 75% is also spent on labor costs. Other categories will be shrinking a bit more, especially in the services and other operating expenses, because a lot of that goes into the one-time funds that we were talking about. So just keep this in mind that the biggest piece of this pie is those labor costs. And lastly, but certainly not least, I do want to spend a bit of time here. As I mentioned, we did adjust some of those out years assumptions, which naturally means that we have to adjust our revenues and our expenses. I do want to mention some of the decisions that we did make in making these adjustments what those are, and that is anything one-time related that was non-labor is completely omitted from our assumptions. So those were backed out. We're assuming that if they were paid for one-time funds, we're not going to be able to pay for them from general funds. Anything that was labor related is actually placed back in our unrestricted. And that is mostly in the nature of trying to present to you a true picture of what it will look like to continue some of those one-time fund needs that we filled the gap that we needed during these past couple of years. So the labor costs that were paid from UPK, educator effectiveness, those are now assumed back into our general funds. So I do want to ensure that we all are aware of some of the creative multi-year projection assumptions that we took at this very point. The other thing that I would mention, that one-time discretionary block grant that I mentioned, that is assumed in 27-28. It is very discretionary in nature. It means that we can actually use it to alleviate some of the deficit spending that we're now projecting. So that is assumed there. I will say the biggest adjustments and expenses are in your 27-28. And this is really the basis of our starting point of conversation. Like I said, it's version 1 of a multi-year projection. It peels back some of the more higher assumptions that we've been using. It takes it back to the current trend to see it from that lens, to really truly see what it will look like to truly operate within general funds, which is funded by LCFF, 75% of it, right? This is where it has landed us. We are, as of this very moment, which is what I'm asking of tonight, we are meeting our obligations for the current and the 2 following years. And that is how we arrived to it. And pretty much education code determines how we can certify. And our positive certification is pretty much defined by the fact that we are meeting our obligation in this year and the following year and the year after that. And that is what I'm asking of you all tonight as a motion. What is next for us is the January governor's budget for 26-27. The budget cycle continues, as you all noticed from the first infographic. So we are already looking at ahead. We're looking at next year, to be honest. In January, we'll be attending school services governor's workshop to kind of get some of the beginning stages of the assumptions that we'll be using to start building out that budget. And we'll be bringing that back and trying to incorporate as much as possible already in the multi-year that we present at second interim. The second interim is brought to you, once again, looking at the progression of now as the first interim in comparison to second interim in the March 15 deadline, I think a little bit earlier than March 15, if I'm not mistaken, I think the first week of March. And we can start working in some of those assumptions to ensure that we have a more reflective picture of what we're thinking our budget is going to look like next year before we even get to the June meeting, which is the ideal progression of how we should be doing budget development. And I will say the last point is a big one, is that commitment overall of addressing the deficit spending. It is a conversation that I would say has started from day one, at least for me, since I joined on July 1st. It's a conversation that involves a lot of people. It's not a single point of decision of any single individual, and it requires a lot of brains. I certainly cannot speak to what's needed in the classroom. I need to heavily rely on colleagues that absolutely understand them much better than I do. So that conversation truly is involving everyone, and then something you can think of. Everyone's coming on for the ride, and it's already started. And it started at cabinet level. Cabinet level, and it's moving past that. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for us to truly start thinking about how to make ourselves whole, especially when it comes to the 8% reserve that we currently have in our policy for us to maintain as reserves. And that's what we are. I will add in one last update. We do have our 24-25 financial audit, and we did ask for an extension. Federal guidance was a little bit delayed this year due to government shutdown, so our auditors did ask us to request an extension. So you'll be seeing that probably in the February meeting. You would typically have been seeing that in January. The deadline would have been December 15. And now the new deadline for Newman is January 29. So just wanted to mention that. Sorry, it's not in the bullet points, but that literally just got approved today. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity to let you know about that. And of course, questions, discussions.
As you get into your questions
Yeah.
As you get into your questions and discussions, as you saw the multi-year projection, I believe the following year we are, in the next year we are at 3.29%.
That's correct.
So with a difference of deficit spending of 2.6. So really, if we were able to cut around 2.6, we would no longer be deficit spending. So if we can cut more than that, then we would start rebuilding our reserves. So I need to know, I guess, direction from you. Are you comfortable with cutting 2 million from the budget? Are we talking 2.5, or are you say try to get to 3? So I kind of need feedback from the board and as direction on what you want to see presented to you in January.
And I will just add in that when you make cuts in the upcoming year, it actually creates less of a cut for the following year. A lot of people don't quite understand that, but if we were to back out expenses from 26, 27, then those expenses wouldn't be assumed in 27, 28. So not only are you building a reserve down at the bottom of that calculation because you're starting with more money in your reserve, but you're also not assuming the same level of expenses, especially those that carry through year over year. So that's where the decision lies, right? How do we split that? Do we take the impact in one given year, which will support us in 27, 28 and out years if we were to carry this through? Or do we want to split it? In which case we have to think about how much more of deficit spending can we afford, and what percentage of decrease do we really want to look at as far as 26, 27 and then 27, 28.
And my recommendation on that, I ran some numbers, and if we could cut about 2.5 million going into next year's budget, we would be at 7.5% reserve. And then the following year in 27, 28, we'd be over 8% reserve, is what it would do to the multi-year projection.
Any questions? Any questions from the board to Ms. Tapia?
Yeah,
I have a few, but I'll wait till you guys are done.
For the unduplicated threshold, like you said it was 71 and then it went down to what?
Yeah, let me actually, I do have that
66.
number.
What's like the threshold number again? Like the number, the one you want to hit? Is it 80, 75? It's somewhere.
To get the ultimate one, it's
Yeah.
in the I think it's 83. But that's.
So do
that's
we
a guess.
know why that went down 5%?
So I'll just
like
clarify that.
From my experience, from the
percentage.
unduplicated, like that's like the key. Like we want to try and
Yes.
get up to that 83%.
That is correct, because we will get more of that supplemental concentration. And the way supplemental concentration works, obviously, is very directed and based on that small group of students. So it can be directed much more easily than the base grant funding can, which is, ultimately our goal is to serve those students of higher needs. I will say the other thing to keep in mind with the duplicated pupil counts, it is also a rolling average. So if we had a low percentage, and just to clarify what those percentage are, it was 74.25 assumed in the adopted budget. Our latest certification was 66.99. So we did miss that mark of 70% as well. And the way that works is that if we do have a lower percentage, if we were to work to improve that the following year, then we can average that out because it is ongoing and it is rolling. And we can hopefully reverse some of that impact of 400K adjustment. So that's in essence the intention or the goal of us looking at collecting information in a timely manner. And I would say advocating for our families. It's not surprising. A lot of districts are struggling to collect information for many reasons that I won't get into the details of that, but I think we're all very well aware of the families we serve and how willing they are to provide information. And this was known very early on, and everyone who's involved in this process tried their best to ensure that we were still collecting them because we still need them. And a lot of families think, well, I don't need a lunch application because my students are getting free lunch. Everybody's getting free lunch. But they don't always understand the other implications of not being able to collect alternative income forms. So that messaging needs to start very early on as it comes to next year. And I think if we do that early on, we can probably improve that percentage.
And then I'm a little skeptical about the federal revenue because of like from what I've heard, Title I might pretty much be guaranteed, but 2 through 9, those are the ones that are up in the air. I assume most of our funding though is Title I.
Yes, a good portion of our title funding is Title 1A. I would say the majority of it is, and I can definitely hand you over percentages, by the way. Sorry, I didn't have that breakdown. So on the line has always been those that are not Title I. At least that's my understanding. When we started the year, there was guidance from CDE as far as what you should be doing. I think pretty much every CBO was wondering the same. Should we not rely on Title I funds? Because we still need to provide those services, whether we get the grant funding or not, or federal funding or not. And it was pretty much decided that once the feds basically created some sort of commitment, it did not include a reverse on the commitment to Title I funds, which is the largest bucket. So we kept it. We also kept it at the same rate. I suspect January is going to bring far more information about federal revenue than what we know at this very moment. So really that adjustment that you see there between adopted budget and first interim, it truly is only the carryover that we didn't spend last year. Not much more adjustment was made in that moment, and that's just a pure decision of talking to others as far as like what it is that they're embedding into their assumptions at this very moment. If something changes in the January proposal, we may have to look at ensuring that we have a plan of continuing to provide the support for those students. But I'll certainly bring that forward and let you all know as soon as we get that more information, because that will be another deciding factor of what sort of adjustments we need to do to our expenditures.
And then we only had the 2 block grants. Is that correct? I don't know if you can show.
Yeah, let me go to revenues. Was this it? Oh, sorry, no, one more.
No, one more, yeah. So
The
increase.
SSPD?
SSP.
Yes.
Are those, Prop 28 is one.
Prop 28 is one. Youth Behavioral Health Initiative Grant is another one that's the one that we're doing the partnership with Stanislaus County. That one really is a continuation of, for instance, we have SBHIP that was very, very similar, and that's to provide mental health services for students and pay for mental health clinicians at some point. So it's just basically a continuation of that. When and a little bit of a background on the Youth Behavioral Health Initiative Grant, that also happened at the cusp of transition. That was actually something we probably could have easily recognized last year and carried over, but we didn't. Actually, our own auditors have advised us as far as when to recognize it, because that was one of my first questions. Do you need me to adjust somewhere in the audit, or how do you want me to handle that? And the county did get an MOU from us right at the beginning of July, even though the grant period technically started last year. So it's just an adjustment to ensure that we are recognizing the revenue that we are in fact receiving for that grant. Prop 28, there was an adjustment based on P2 of last year.
Anyone else?
For ADA, because one of my big things is like the independent study. So the kids have 15 days, and you've kind of made it so that parents and students are aware that they have these days. And my fear is that, kind of telling them like you have 15 days when I think we should be telling them you have none, because we want kids in the class, and those days should really only be set aside for like absolute necessities. And I get the whole thing is about, we want to retain the money and we want kids to be doing work, but I think unintentionally, it kind of said to parents like, hey, you have these 15 days, but then those 15 days, and we've kind of heard some kids have already reached those 15 days. So then, like, if they miss more, we're not getting any of that. And I'd say in my experience in my class, like I've never necessarily seen a student go those 15 days. Like I've seen 5, I've seen 8, maybe 10, but the 15 is like super, super rare, unless it's like, eventually it just gets to home and hospital. That's the only one that I've seen that like really jumps over the 15 days.
talking with the sites and the students that are reaching the 15 days, they're typically our same families that would have already been assigned to DART or SARB or those kind of things, there's a family history or a history of that student consistently missing those many days. It's just now they're getting to that point where now we have to do the interventions. It's just a little later in the year before we do the interventions to try to meet their needs.
So we don't think that will lower our average?
I have the numbers. I'm trying to look at what our attendance was last year and then write in how much our short-term independent study has increased our attendance. Like, how much does that account for the increased attendance? Did we actually increase in the seat attendance this year, or is it really truly coming from the independent study? I did not have the final calculations on those today.
Okay.
Yep.
And I will say part of the reason, and just to ensure we also understand and we're on the same page of that, even though independent study is part of the reason why we're generating good ADA, that is not necessarily taken into account in our ADA assumption, because I know for a fact that a lot of students are going to reach 15 days probably in the first half of the year, given that the holidays are coming up. So we didn't want to really rely on that so heavily. So it really wasn't accounted for in the manner that you would want to account for it. So I really did just look at that trend of students who were showing up to the classroom every day. And of course, I'm in the CBO role, but I'm a big believer that, yes, there's the money side, but there's like the learning loss as well. And just from personal experience, it's very difficult to bring back some of the instructional time, even with independent study. So I hear where you're coming from as far as independent study being used in that perspective, but from an assumptions perspective, we didn't necessarily heavily rely on the fact that we were going to have that as our only way to continue in the ADA trajectory that we're in.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions for Ms. Tapia? No? I actually have a couple, but first off, I would just like to thank the previous board members before us, because they set out years ago, and I don't know the exact timeline, but it's well before our time on the board, of having that reserve of 8%, right? Because, you know, if you look at the numbers now, and if we didn't have that 8%, we would be in a lot worse trouble than we're in now, right? So yeah, we are deficit spending, you know, almost $5 million this year alone, but that is the priority to stop the bleeding, right? So we have to get that under control over this year, starting this year, to move forward to the future years, to make sure that we can get that reserve fund back up. Because if our ADA and all of our enrollment and our attendance continues to go down, right, those are monies that we just can't count on, right? So that is a huge priority, and they're already starting to work at that, the district level leadership, and all of us here, thank you for that, to come up with a plan to get those numbers under control. Can you go back to a couple slides to the step and column real quick? There you go. So if my math's right, that's roughly around, just step and column increase is around $1 million plus or minus a little bit, right? It's about $1 million total, probably a little bit more.
Yep.
1.2. I don't. Maybe do you have the numbers on that?
I don't have the
total?
exact down
Okay,
to
so
the set
it's-
number, but yes, if you're taking the three top categories of the table in itself, yes, it's the adjustment of the step and column.
That's
just
almost probably around 1.2 million, just by going over for year to year step and column. So keep that in mind, right? And then if you go a couple slides ahead to the amount of deficit spending for this year.
right here.
So it's 4.9 million, which is almost $5 million, right? So what I'm recommending to our district leadership and to Mr. Pruitt is plan for $2.5 to $3 million cuts this year, and then come up with a plan over the next couple months to where if needed, we could scale that back a little bit. But unfortunately, those cuts have to be made. We can't end up in 27 with only 1.8 million at 3% reserve. We just can't do that, right? So that's my opinion. That's the only questions that I had for you tonight. I reviewed all the slides in the backup, for a long time, but those are the couple things that I saw that popped out, because those are the things we can control.
Yes,
right.
that is. We're in the people business, so 75% of our budget is that.
Correct. Any other questions for Ms. Tapia?
No, thank you. You answered my question. I I had asked Mr. Pruitt a few questions beforehand, which he answered, but I was concerned whether or not we were being conservative enough with the ADA, but it sounds like you have accounted for all of the different variables that go into that. Just to make sure that we are not over projecting anything, but
Yes.
thank you.
I thought that more immediately was to adjust that out year percentage calculation of 88.
Okay.
I think that was immediately the first, actually, it's quite literally the first thing I did in my Excel spreadsheet was reduce that.
Okay.
It's just peeling back all those layers of what has been built over years, especially with the one-time funds that supported a lot of districts, not just Newman. It's just the easier way to look at it. It's back to the status quo of LCFF, and that is the way to do it. And I also didn't want to take any creative decision-making just to balance things out, which is why I put back a lot of the salaries costs that were funded by one-time funds that allowed it, by the way, back into our assumptions. I didn't want to start adjusting things, assuming that those things were not going to be carried forward. So this is truly, when we say conservative, this is truly a conservative approach.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Action item 1, review and approve first interim budget report for fiscal year 2025-26. Could I get a motion for action item 1?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Cerruti. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Rivas. Mr. Watt?
Aye.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Hi.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Cerruti?
Aye.
And Mr. Cabral votes aye, 5-0. And that will conclude the special meeting on December 11th by the Newman-Crozana Unified School District, and we will adjourn at 6:42, Frank?
5:46.
Oh, I'm sorry, 5:46. 5:46 PM. We will see you all next month. Thank you.